Elena, how are things at the moment? We're in the middle of August. I suppose there's a kind of a busy domestic market out there, but of course September is around the corner, and the domestic market will shy away a little.
Sure. But I suppose, Owen, after hotels were given the opportunity to open a phase earlier, all of a sudden you kind of a nearer open date, in terms of trying to build a base. So in the general scheme of things, what it has come to is right now in August, not even half of the hotel rooms across the country are occupied. And yes, there are seasonal and coastal places that are probably doing a little bit better. But the other side of that, then you've urban areas in Dublin in particular, which is only showing a 17% occupancy, which means that really only 1 in every 10 rooms are occupied. And I mean, that's the scale of it. It's drastic. And I suppose it's been going on now for so many months now.
Talk to us for a moment, Elena, about mass gatherings and the restrictions that are still in place. Even though I know, for example, you have a very big ballroom that could accommodate quite a number of people, yet you're still limited to a very small cap.
Yeah, I suppose the first thing I'd like to say, Owen, is, the gatherings that we host would be traditionally smaller or larger. The word mass for me kind of indicates when you're in the region of thousands. So I think sometimes we throw the term around a little loosely, but mass gatherings are really not at the scale of what the average wedding is. The average wedding in Ireland traditionally would have been 162 people. So you now have venues that have ballrooms of 900 square meters or 1,000 square meters, and they're hosting weddings that are, I won't even say 50 because it's less than that by the time you take into consideration your team and, potential vendors, etc., that can be in the room. In the case of all of our weddings, none of them have been more than 45 people. So we've been lucky enough that it's all happened in the one room.
And the cap at the moment is 50 people, is that correct?
Is 50. Yeah, so that gives us then the additional space there, gives us the opportunity, obviously, for the team to serve it safely. But I suppose we are asking that, larger venues, that the capacity would be taken into consideration. Because when you look at 50 people in a ballroom of 1,000 square meters, it's social distancing in the extreme. We are also, when you think about it, 5 months into this new type of behavior, as guests. And I suppose from a hotel's perspective, there were many hotels that stayed open, 1 out of every 10 during lockdown. So we had the benefit of the expertise from, those hotels that were open. That provided our baseline for developing our guidelines. And there are guidelines specific to weddings and to other, business events, etc. And I suppose, we did recently put a new document into government with a view to getting, I suppose, the number of guests linked to the capacity of the venue. And I think, in terms of the additional suggestions that we made to maintain public health, because at the end of the day, that's number one. We sincerely hope that it'll be taken on board. But there seems to be a huge focus right now on getting children back to school. And I suppose my own sense of expectation about the next phase is, I don't know if we're going to see as much progress as we would like.
Absolutely. You mentioned earlier the kind of coastal hotels occupancy levels are okay, although obviously everyone is worried when the schools go back. But Dublin, even currently, has a major problem. What do you put that down to? Why isn't Dublin doing as well as the rest of the country?
In terms of international travel, and I was looking yesterday at our famous COVID app, and it said that only 2% of the cases, just when I looked at my dashboard yesterday, were related to travel. Now, I think that sends out a serious message. We have been advocating for a number of weeks for a testing regime to be put in place. I personally believe because the numbers of people traveling right now are at a much lower level, that now's the time to put something in place. And yes, it's probably not going to capture everything, because we all know that you could take a COVID test today and it could be negative, and tomorrow it could be a different version. But it's about managing, I suppose, travel safely, because we're going to need this as we move forward. As an island nation, we can't stay closed. We've never really been truly closed either. So there's always been that trickle of people coming in through our own Irish airports, and indeed coming from across the border, where there's a lesser level of restriction. And whilst, the capacity of the airports up there are not the same as what you would have in the context of Dublin, it does mean that there's a loophole there. So I think the best way to address this is to look at a testing regime.
The July stimulus package has come and gone. I know collectively we were disappointed by the level of support. But just talk to me about the VAT. The VAT wasn't touched in July. We're going to obviously resume the fight to try and get VAT reduced in October. Do you think we'll be successful? What are your thoughts on that?
I think we have to be successful. There's so much at risk here. or that. So, I mean, we're absolutely in a slide downwards. I really feel like we're in a bubble right now, but that bubble's going to burst as we head into September in terms of where we're at now on the commitments. I think government was very, very well intended. I do think that our Minister, Catherine Martin, is doing a fantastic job in terms of advocating for us. And I do think the government has more of awareness, but I suppose there's a much bigger thing here from a health perspective, and everybody's probably vying for their own, portfolios and that. But I believe it's a necessity. And I suppose what probably brings that to the fore is, you have businesses across the board, so particularly in border areas where the looming Brexit issue is another thing that's going to compound everything. But it doesn't make sense that you have a 5% VAT rate having been slashed significantly from, the 20s down to 5%, and we're at 13.5%. That makes no sense. And I suppose what people need to be mindful of, this isn't about, tourism businesses or hoteliers, getting a little bit more, pocketing a little bit more. This is about giving the incentive to people to pay lower prices. Government is going to take the hit on it to try and create demand that is needed across the country. And I suppose the other side of it, as it stands in Europe right now, there's only one country, Denmark, which has a higher VAT rate from us. So when we do get back into the international zone, we're always talking about value and we're always being measured about it. But that's a critical piece of the infrastructure right now. And given the fact that we do have a border in Ireland and there's 2 levels of VAT operating, it makes no sense.
How important, Elena, is the wage subsidy scheme for the hotel sector?
It's the difference between survival and failure, quite simply. It is the most critical piece because at the end of the day, wages are our biggest outlay and our biggest cost. In the average hotel or guest house, it's about 40%. So the scale of it is huge. The original TWSS scheme was a fantastic intervention when it came. And, it gave that link, I suppose, from employer to employee, bringing teams together. And there's all the reasons why. Now, like any scheme that was developed a quick notice, there were some challenges with it. But obviously the overall scheme, was such a positive thing. You kind of worked with that. However, as we prepare now to morph into the new version of the scheme for all the world, it's critical that the challenges that were with it were addressed, because now we've the benefit of knowing what's not working as part of it.
Con, you're CEO of the Irish Caravan and Camping Council. How is the season going so far?
The season at the moment on is quite positive. It was a late start, like everyone else, not opening until the 29th of June. But there was obviously a big lot of pent-up demand from the domestic market, and so for that reason we have a lot of a huge surge in bookings from the domestic market for all of July and into August at the moment, especially from the family market while the schools are off and that. So there's over demand at the moment, but it's a short-lived season. So.
How important is the international market in a kind of a normal year?
Well, the international market is a huge loss, as in it helps to extend our season. We get a lot of the retired European market or UK market that would normally start from Easter coming in. And again, from September and out into October, you get that market. So all that market has been lost this year. And
yeah.
And once we get beyond the school holiday period, we will notice that will really hurt our sector again. So.
Yeah. And going forward, if we're going to have to learn to live with COVID, or if we're all as consumers going to be super conscious of safety and hygiene and so on, your product actually would tend to kind of work well in that regard, wouldn't it? Just if we kind of leap forward, your segment of the market may actually be positive.
Yes. It's seen as a safe way. You're out in the open air. You're traveling. You're self-contained. You're traveling with your own home. So it's under the COVID restrictions at the moment, it seems as a good safe holiday for people to travel. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And just looking forward, say, to the budget in October. I know your season will largely be finished by then, but initiatives within the budget will obviously impact on you next year. Is there anything in the budget in terms of tax or spend that are particularly important to your sector?
Yeah. Well, in others, rising costs have been an issue anyway prior to the pandemic and all that. So the VAT rate would be hugely helpful for our sector and things like. Our sector does offer good value anyway to people, but is to stay competitive and to remain competitive is vital. So, and especially with our colleagues across the border in Northern Ireland who are currently on the 5% VAT rate. So we'd like to see the VAT reduced to 5% here. Local authority rates as well. That's an issue, and we have some areas who have just gone through a reevaluation of local authority rates, and will be asked to pay much higher local authority rates next year, which will not be feasible for them at the moment. So that would be an issue as well. Yeah.
Catherine, tell us a little bit about the reopening of the Guinness Storehouse. How's it going?
We reopened our doors on the 11th of July, and it's fantastic to be opened. And I suppose we've really focused on marketing to a domestic audience, an audience that has always been there, but maybe we didn't focus on it quite as much. So as a thank you to all the amazing frontline workers, we've offered free entry to all frontline workers, and that's actually going to be something that we continue until December of this year. And that's been received really, really well. I suppose it's testament to Guinness and their advocacy right throughout the generations, is that they've always been there to help as part of their social responsibility. We've also reduced our ticketing price our opening ticket price to €15. Again, that's gone down very well. And for the first time, you can come into the restaurants without having to pay an admission fee, and likewise for our retail. So that's been some of the measures we've done. But we've, of course, most importantly, focused on the safety of our customers and of our team. And we've had a number of measures in place, including the Fáilte Ireland Safety Charter, to protect our customers and to protect our team.
How important, well, I know how important, but international tourism. I mean, in a normal year, I suppose international tourists would be the main bulk of visitors to the storehouse. So obviously, you'd like that to recommence as soon as possible in a safe manner.
Absolutely, Owen. Ireland as an island needs international tourists. Our hospitality is so well known. We have such an amazing offer, from amazing experiences in the city to our natural landscapes right across the island. For sure, yes, international tourists have made up 93% of the numbers of people that came to the Guinness Storehouse. And so for us, as we move forward, we've really taken a step-by-step approach to reopening, but we would love to see international tourism coming back. And we would love to see that done in a safe way. We never want to jeopardise anything that the government have done, or that the country, the measures people have taken, and the sacrifices that people have made right across the board, and we see that continuing. But we do think that there is a way to start to restart the tourism economy by getting tourism back, and that's by testing at the airports and making sure that we're not asking the businesses alone to put measures in place to protect the country. But we need international tourists back. We need a balance. We want to have domestic tourists and we want to have an offer for them, but we also need international tourism to come back. And it would be fantastic to see more comprehensive measures, or at least a more focused strategy on when and where that's going to happen. The measures that were put in place earlier this year were really helpful, but it would be fantastic to see that been looked at. Or indeed, some of my colleagues in both the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland have talked about the fantastic take-up that has been in restaurants and bars for the eat out, dine out experience. And again, I would love to see restaurants and bars been able to benefit from something like that, especially in Dublin city centre, where it's been extremely quiet this summer. The proposition in Dublin is so important as our capital city. So to look at that for bars and restaurants, and to look at some opportunity to kickstart the experience for events around size would be really important.
Fergal, it's a really, really difficult and awful time for the tourism sector as a whole, but you guys in the coach tourism sector have literally had no income for a number of months now. How are you coping?
Yeah, really difficult, Owen. It's a difficult period from the 13th of March, when lockdown happened. Just everything stopped from us, which was obviously coming up to Paddy's weekend. We had a number of different groups. Us personally, we had about 7 or 8 coaches ready to rock and roll, with American groups coming in, and that was all cancelled. And we thought, hang on a minute, this doesn't look good, and we could be looking at a few months of real difficulty. And as everything else then got locked down, and we saw what was going on around the world, it obviously escalated into a major problem. So yeah, we're now into August, and yeah, there's been virtually no tourist coach has moved around the country. A couple of private hires maybe in the last couple of weeks for events, but apart from that, if you travel around Ireland and the normal places, Killarney, Galway, Donegal, Wexford, the one thing you won't see at the moment is a tour coach.
Yeah, and I think what a lot of people don't appreciate is how costly an asset a tour coach is, and you know, if it's not being used, if it's just parked up, you know, it's I suppose equivalent to an airline having aircraft not utilized. It's a huge burden on businesses.
Yeah, it's huge on. I suppose the biggest challenge that certainly in the coach tour companies have is that they would have been preparing for the new season. They would have got new stock in. So a large coach is approximately around 300,000 euros. If it's doing tourism, you get a certain amount of VAT back on that. But that vehicle then must generate revenue during the period of time. It also will depreciate. So it's going to depreciate maybe 20, 25,000 euros a year. A lot of the companies will be dealing with banks now who have a 3 or a 6 month stay. But the problem with the coach tour industry is as we move into those 6 months and the banks start knocking on the door in September, October, certainly those tour companies are looking at no revenue again until maybe May or June next year if things turn around. If we have change, May or June of next year. If we don't have change, you know, they could be looking at another complete wipeout for 2021.
Yeah, it's grim. I know the July stimulus package has been and gone, and there was a sum of money allocated specifically for the coach tourism sector, which I suppose must be a help, but it can go no way to recovering lost ground.
Yeah, I think you can look at it a number of different ways. I think it looks by giving any amount, it's given us recognition. We have been working very hard behind the scenes, certainly since March, but also in the last number of years, that coach tourism has been getting the recognition it deserves and it being valued as a serious industry and part of the tourism industry. So while the 10 million is not going in any way, shape or form going to cover the losses of coach operators in this country, especially in tourism, it is a start, and Fáilte Ireland now will have the task of working with the Coach Tourism Transport Council and other stakeholders in the coach tourism industry to distribute that money to badly needed coach operators. But as it's only the start as far as we're concerned, we will be lobbying strongly, certainly for the budget, because we know that this is going to carry on till next year, and we'll be looking at a continuous package, hopefully, that will carry us through that period of time as well. Yeah. So if we can get back up and running again, if we can get our skies open again, and if we can get people traveling back to Ireland again, 2021 may hold up, because a lot of the cancellations for this year may transfer to next year.
Yeah.
The difficulty will be if we get into March, January, February, March, and we're still in the same situation, people will cancel and they may not come back again. So some of the bookings certainly that we have for 2020 are on hold for 2021. And if we could retain them, they would be massive for our industry and of course for the incoming tour operators as well.
The self-catering sector right now is doing very well, particularly along the coastal areas, with 85 to 95, 100% in the coastal regions occupancy, less so inland, around 65%. But a short window, the shutters literally come down on the 22nd of August. It's traditionally when the schools go back, and with no international travel whatsoever, it's a very short window. It looks very buoyant at the moment. Everybody's very, buoyed up with the domestic marketing campaign, etc. And we have been very lucky as an accommodation sector. But as I say, not sustainable. The domestic market won't keep us going.
Yeah. And normally the international markets would lengthen that season considerably.
Considerably, yeah. I mean, it had changed over the last maybe 8 years, I would say. Our proportion of international travel exceeded domestic, and I'd say it was 70% international and 30% domestic. Now, it depended, obviously on regions. Places like Kilkee or Bundoran or Lahinch or whatever would be traditionally in the summer season would be domestic, and you wouldn't get an extended season. But generally speaking, self-catering, the international market had extended that season way into the end of October, from March to October. So that's gone completely.
Yeah. And what's the value like at the moment, Cynthia? You say places are busy for these few short weeks. So is there still good value out there?
There's excellent value out there, Owen, and it really was annoying me, to be honest, with a lot of the media reports, particularly in the newspapers. And I would put it down to really lazy journalism, because they were quoting prices just flicked out and they didn't check anything up. And it definitely isn't the norm. It doesn't represent the value that's out there. In fact, just last night for myself, I was looking at a place down in Valencia, you know, beautiful house, and for a week, it was at the end of August, €480 for the week, sleeping 4. I mean, you couldn't, that's value. And the other thing that was being reported was that, self-catering operators were upping the prices because of COVID and the cleaning and all of that. That hasn't happened. Everybody was just so delighted to get bookings. We've adjusted, and I mean, the places are cleaned anyway, and this is just the next 2 layers. And obviously we didn't have the problems with shared facilities. So prices, good value, absolute good value. And I would like to see a little bit more from journalists, a little bit more research, rather than just comment.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
The international market, we need to really look at it. And there's a real balancing act. I know that from everybody involved in tourism. We're all, how would you say, afraid to seem to be ignoring public health advice. But I think there has to be a balance, because domestic tourism is not going to save all these jobs, and one wonders what is going to happen. There has to be innovative ways to bring back international travel in a safe way.
Niall, how is the visitor experiences and attraction sector coping this summer?
It's an easy question to answer, albeit a difficult question, very difficult. There's no two ways about it. Some very difficult times for many of our members. We've over 100 members across the island of Ireland. We're probably the most diverse element of the tourism sector, if you consider big, small, urban, rural, indoor, outdoor, cultural, experiential. So we have a very diverse membership. We're certainly seeing in the urban locations that attractions are struggling more than rural. And even within that, then the indoor attractions are struggling more than the outdoor attractions. So for obvious reasons, when you consider the public health concerns and the consumer sentiment that we're seeing from South Ireland. Very difficult summer. Some attractions are reporting that business is not even at normal domestic levels as of 2019. And if you consider some of our members' attractions have they depend on international tourism by up to 95% in some areas, if you believe. So yeah, extremely difficult times. Whilst there's been some green shoots with some of the announcements made in the July stimulus, it certainly doesn't satisfy all requirements for the BEA sector, and that's something that is of huge concern to us at the moment.
Yeah, and why are the rural attractions doing better, say, than the urban attractions? Because I've heard that as well. I've heard Dublin attractions are really having a tough time, for example, whereas on the West Coast maybe there's a little bit more buoyancy.
Yeah, I think there's two specific reasons. One is in relation to the fact that most of the rural attractions are actually outdoor. So immediately you have a draw to a wide open spaces, which allows for physical distancing. And certainly gives consumer sentiment a boost in relation to feeling comfortable in those locations. And the second thing is domestic tourism, by its nature, tend to veer west from the greater population base in the summer times. So what you traditionally see on is an exodus of people from the greater population base on the east coast in Dublin to the west of Ireland or to the southeast when it comes to staycations, which is very traditional movement of people. So by default, you're seeing a lot of those consumers engaging with experiences and attractions in rural locations. I think there is no doubt about it. We will see some casualties during the winter of this year where businesses may never open at all again. And that's something which is of huge concern for Ireland Inc. and tourism, particularly when we see a return to international tourism, hopefully in the next 18 months to 2 years, that there will be less product for Ireland to market itself on.
Yeah, that's our big concern. Just looking forward to the budget in October, is there any particular measure that government might do that could help the visitor experiences and attractions?
Yeah, there are a couple of other measures we'd like to see enacted. Just been talk of an adaptation grant through Fáilte Ireland for attractions, which is yet to be announced. We'd like to see that accelerated. And also we'd like to see the Stay and Spend initiative extended to tourist attractions. And this is something of huge frustration to the VEA sector, something that we have lobbied on from the very outset of the thoughts of a Stay and Spend initiative. Something which would cost the taxpayer no additional money, but would actually help sustain quite a number of attractions if it was included in the Stay and Spend initiative. So we would certainly like to see a bit more meaningful engagement from government in relation to those items.
And Nikki, how bad are things at the moment for the professional conference organising sector?
Oh, things are very drastic right now for our sector. Unfortunately, month by month they get worse. Yeah, a lot of our clients want to play it safe because a lot of them are medical associations, so I think they feel they need to act in a very responsible way and go virtual for 2021 and resume to physical meetings and hybrid meetings in 2022. So for the professional conference organizer, it's terrible, it really is.
Yeah.
And for Ireland.
Yeah, and is there anything we could be doing to make Ireland a safer destination, or to give your clients and your customer base more reassurance that Ireland is if you like open for business and a safe place to hold a conference in?
I think right now there's a lot of confusion around the message we're giving to our international clients. They don't know. I think a lot of people in Ireland don't know either. So, for me, the quarantining is an absolute cancer for our business. I believe there's more clever ways of doing. We need to introduce testing in the airports so that people don't have to quarantine. And I'm not, first and foremost, is the health of our nation, the health of anyone visiting our country. However, it's destroying tourism. It's destroying business tourism. We need to find a better solution in testing.
Yeah, so testing, therefore people can, if you like, prove that they're COVID negative, and then there's no reason that they can't do their business or have a leisure vacation in Ireland, is there?
Exactly. Be it coming here for business or a leisure tourist or a business tourist, you won't come if you have to quarantine.
Yeah.
So it just, for me, it's a no-brainer to introduce more advanced testing at the airport.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of European cities and countries becoming very competitive in Europe. There's only a small pie of the business out there, and we need to try and get it for Ireland. So countries like Spain and Portugal have a VAT exemption on services for professional conference organisers. Everything is at zero. There's a lot of incentives for associations. They're giving subsidies of 50% off the convention centres. Because of physical distancing, so that's all happening in many other European countries, and I think we're a little bit behind the game.
What could the government do, Nikki, now and I suppose in the upcoming budget to particularly help your sector get through this crisis?
We need a better wage subsidy scheme for tourism, and we need a grant scheme or low interest or zero interest loans to keep us afloat. Yeah,
so that AIPCO members can still be in business, albeit obviously greatly diminished, but still in business for when the recovery does come.
Exactly. So right now, we have all reinvented ourselves. We've created virtual platforms. That's just to keep our doors open, but we still can't maintain the level of resources that we have for the future business that we have on the books.
So Darren, it's an awful year, obviously. The ITOA have been particularly badly affected. How's it looking for ITOA members at the moment?
Yes, Owen, it's obviously a terrible year. Our members are projecting business to be down 95 to 100%. Some members are going to have no revenue at all. We ourselves are going to be down about 98%. So really, really tough times, as you can imagine. Because
all business effectively for ITOA members comes from the international markets, isn't that the case?
That's right. We have leisure and business travellers coming in from overseas markets, whether it's North America, Europe, or beyond, and really no domestic business at all to speak of. Yeah, what we really need from the government is a comprehensive testing policy to be put in place until such time as we get a vaccine, because we can't just wait for a vaccine. If the vaccine doesn't come until quarter 2, 3 next year, it's going to be too late, and it's going to cause even more damage to the industry.
Yeah, and you're obviously still in touch with your client base and stuff, and there's still a kind of an appetite for Ireland, is there? Once this crisis passes, and once if you like, it's safe to travel again.
Yes, absolutely. As I was saying, the Northern European markets wanted to travel this autumn if they could have done, but that's looking very unlikely at this point. So definitely demand there. Also the Mediterranean markets, our client base, again, looking very positive. They're rebooking at almost 100% of previous levels for next year. Whether or not that will materialize, we'll have to wait and see, but definitely a positive attitude. And also from the North American markets, Ireland is seen as a very safe destination. It's handled it well, low number of cases at the moment. So hopefully it'll continue over the coming months and we can welcome back the visitors early next year.
And so, Darren, do you think the government could be doing more to support the tourism industry?
Absolutely. The July stimulus package was very disappointing in terms of, not providing any real sectoral support. The industry is in crisis. There's certain things that they could do immediately in the upcoming budget. The reduction in the VAT rate to 5% for the next year or two, and then a permanent reduction to 9% would be hugely beneficial. We'd also be looking at the extension of the corporation tax losses back beyond 2019. Again, that could see an immediate injection of some cash flow into businesses. And for our own and other businesses like ours in the visitor attractions, B&Bs and other sectors that rely on the international visitors, our business is down well in excess of 70, 80, 90%. And really we'd like to see a sectoral wage subsidy scheme put in place. A business that's down only 30% is very different to a business that's down 95%. So we really like to see the €200 put back up to €350 per week per person for those businesses that are really, really struggling and have revenues down at 70, 80, 90%.